Arkham City Part 4, Night in the Museum. Gotham City, New Jersey, Monday, January 18th, 2021. Batman had just rescued the medical team from Riddler and his deadly quiz show. Everyone in the medical team was safe, and he had just learned where Mr. Freeze has held himself up during his incarceration in Arkham City. Batman has arrived at the old GCPD substation, and he was not the only one there. It seemed there were a bunch of men there, armed. They were looking for somebody. Batman quickly identified them as Joker's men, since they all were wearing clown masks. And right above where Batman was standing at, Batman saw a lone political prisoner. Who knows what this poor man was in for? But Batman went over to question him. And of course, the man freaked out, and Batman asked him,
"What are you doing here?"
The frightened prisoner answers Batman.
"Please, I just came looking for food."
Batman answers the prisoner back.
"Up here?"
The prisoner answers Batman.
It wasn't easy. I've been watching those guys down there. They're all crazy. Penguin's guys were waiting for the Jokers, but then the Jokers turned up and kicked their asses.
And Batman explains to the prisoner.
"The Joker's crew are looking for Mr. Freeze."
And then the political prisoner goes on to further explain to Batman.
"He's pretty much the only one I haven't seen. Penguin's guys went into the building, and Jokers have spent the last God knows how long trying to cut their way in."
Then Batman tells the prisoner,
"I'm going to find a way in. In the meantime, you get back to the safety of the shanty town."
The prisoner acknowledges Batman and runs off. Then Batman decides to sneak his way in there as he took down stealthily all the Joker's men who were patrolling the front of the building. Then he took out the men who were trying to break in, and he succeeded. Then Batman made his way into the front entrance of the former police substation. There was a dead penguin thug, and Batman can hear over the dead thug's radio the penguin screaming, saying,
"What the Sam hell's going on out there? Anyone, come in. Any of you that are still breathing, come in. I repeat, come in. Set your radio to Puffin 0.
Then Batman grabs the walkie-talkie, smashes it, and takes the encryption card. He puts the encryption card into his cryptographic sequencer, and he hacks the Penguin's communication system. Batman was now in the old police substation, and it was as frigid in there as it was outside. Mr. Freeze has definitely made that his home. He had been using the forensics laboratory for his own personal lab, thought Batman in his mind. And then he uses detective mode, but somebody was jamming it. He couldn't get a clear visual of what was going on, and then he could hear one of the Penguin's men shouting, "The Joker's crew's still outside, Mr. Cobblepot," and Penguin answers back through the radio, "Good, make sure it stays that way." Batman knew he had to get into the old forensics lab, and he had to find a way where no one could see him coming in. And as he was doing that, he could hear the man that was talking to Penguin give orders to the rest of the goons, saying, "Alright, Penguin wants his place held down tight. If you see any of the Joker's crew, kill them. If you see the Batman, kill him too." Another thug answers the leader. Just like that, the leader answers back, "Yes, just like that." Batman had used the ventilation system and got into the old police forensics laboratory. It was frozen. It looked like the Arctic in there. Batman spots the man that had the backpack-mounted military-grade jammer that was jamming his detective mode. Batman took him out stealthily and destroyed the device. Then he activated detective mode to get a clear view of how many men were in there. He could see 5 men, all armed with shotguns. But Batman had the advantage over them. There was a thick mist in the old laboratory that could easily conceal him, and Batman used that to his advantage as he silently took out one by one the Penguin's men until there was only one left. Then Batman surprised him, disarmed him, and began interrogating him to find out the whereabouts of Mr. Freeze.
"Where's Freeze?"
He's in the museum. Penguin's got him.
Then Penguin comes over the goon's radio saying, "I'd have cut that tongue out of your head, boy. I don't like people dropping tails on me." Wah! And the frightened goon says aloud,
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Cobblepot. He made me tell him.
Then Batman headbutts the guy out cold. And then Batman hears the Penguin speaking over the old police station PA saying, "Come, Batman, come to the museum. I got plenty of surprises for you." Batman makes his way towards the exit of the old police substation when suddenly the building rumbled and Batman hears an explosion outside. Batman says aloud to himself,
That doesn't sound good.
Batman made his way out of the building, and as soon as he got out, another explosion happened. Batman quickly noticed where the explosion came from. It was from the Old Finger Causeway Bridge. Penguin, somehow, someway, getting his hands on explosives in a super prison, destroyed the Old Causeway Bridge, completely cutting off access to the southern and western and eastern part of the island. Batman hears the Penguin come over the radio frequency saying, "See, I told you it would work. Blow up the bridge, cut off the clown's forces." And then one of the Penguin thugs says on the radio,
But Mr. Cobblepot, we're stuck too!
and the Penguin answers back, "So?" And the desperate goon says,
We can't get back!
and the Penguin says, "And your point is?" And the thug says,
Well, it's just, you've left us over here with the Joker's crew.
and the Penguin responds back, "Well, son, try to kill them all before you die." Wah, wah. Sure enough, the explosion drew the attention of the Tiger Guards that were flying over on their patrol helicopters. They were shining their searchlights on the destroyed bridge, and Batman could hear on the communication system them addressing Hugo Strange, and it seemed that Hugo Strange knew about this and doesn't seem to care. What kind of prison was Strange running? Wondered Batman in his mind. So Batman makes his way to the old Cyrus Pinckney Museum. It was a museum of natural history that was owned by Penguin, and right next to it was another location of the famed Iceberg Lounge. Now that Penguin was imprisoned here, it was very fitting that he move into one of his former properties. So Batman glides in and takes out all the Penguin's goons that were guarding the front entrance of the old museum. Once that was done, Batman makes his way inside the museum. He was startled by a giant animatronic T-Rex that popped its head out and let out a roar, and then it shorted out. But then Batman could hear several of the Penguin's goons attacking someone. He quickly looks down the stairs and sees a bunch of the Penguin's men beating up a young black prisoner. Batman quickly slides down the handrail of the stairs and engages the Penguin's men. He beats them all up and knocks them out cold. Then he walks over to the prisoner and he says to the prisoner,
You're safe now.
and the prisoner says,
Thank God.
and then Batman says to the prisoner,
You may want to hold off thanking him until you answer some of my questions.
and then Batman says to the prisoner,
Who are you?
and the prisoner answers Batman,
Sorry, man. I'm a cop. Gordon sent us in here. I'm from the 13th Precinct, part of the strike team. Been in here since the beginning.
and Batman says to the cop.
If Gordon sent you, you'll know the code.
Then the cop struggles to remember the code.
Oh, yeah. He said, oh, man, what was it?
And Batman says to him angrily.
The code, now.
Then the young cop remembers.
It's Sarah. He said to tell you the code is Sarah.
And then Batman says.
You're safe, officer.
And the young cop introduces himself.
It's Jones, Batman. Elvis Jones.
Then Batman goes on to explain to Elvis Jones.
Gordon said he was always planning to send your team in.
And Elvis says to Batman.
He wanted to know what was going on in here. I guess we found out. There were 10 of us. Hopefully, there still are.
And Batman says to Elvis Jones,
I told Gordon it was dangerous to send you in. Stay here. If the rest of your team is still alive, I will find them.
So Batman pulls out his palm-top computer from his utility belt and downloads the GCPD personnel files. Now Batman had all the information and the radio frequencies of the tracking devices that each of the 10 undercover cops had, and soon he was able to see on the palm top where their location was at in the museum. And now Batman set forth to rescue the rest of the undercover police officers in the museum. But before Batman departed, he had noticed something curious. In the entryway to the museum was full of display cases of many kinds, including an empty one with 2 cardboard cutouts of women. It was definitely reserved for Bruce Wayne. And each of the display cases had a lot of dead people in there, people who were enemies of the Penguin. And there was even a display case that had Scarface, the marionette that belonged to ventriloquist, in there. But the one that caught Batman's attention was the one that had a young female ninja inside meditating. Batman recognized the uniform. She's with the Society of Shadows, part of Talia's League Guards. And Batman pressed the button, and a recording of the Penguin's voice says, "Who is this nimble minx? Who does she work for? Where does she come from? And how was she able to kill 8 of my men before we got her in this display case?" But that mystery would have to wait. Now Batman ran down the hall. As he ran down the hall, he saw a giant sign spray painted onto the wall with an arrow pointing right. The sign says, "Tryouts this way." Batman followed the sign. As he followed the sign, he noticed in detective mode that there was the skeleton of a lot of men waiting there. Penguin was always known for hosting illegal fight clubs in Gotham City. Batman arrived to a giant open room with a staircase. The staircases were sealed with chain link fence. Even though they had gates, the gates were shut, and Batman can see electricity coursing through the chain link fencing. And the other entryways to the upper floors were shut as the gates were down. Batman saw a cop running towards him. His t-shirt had dead pigs spray painted on it, and Penguin shot him dead with an umbrella gun. And then Penguin let out his well-known quack laugh. And then he sees Batman, and he says to Batman, "So, Batman, what do you come here for? You come here for me, the cop?" As he said the word cop, a couple of his men showed up behind him, and one of his men was the infamous Sickle, the twin brother of Hammer, of the infamous Ambromacci twins, who Batman may or may have not have killed at the steel mill. And with his only hand, he had a death grip on one of the other police officers' throat. And the Penguin goes on to say, "Or you're here for me." Then Batman looked silently at the Penguin and just answered,
I was originally here for Mr. Freeze and the cops, but since you mention it, maybe I'll add you as a bonus.
And Penguin says to Batman, "Ha! Look who thinks who's scary." Then the Batman says to Penguin,
I would have been afraid of you, Cobblepot, if you were only a few inches taller.
Batman could see from the Penguin's facial expression that that comment rubbed him the wrong way. And then Penguin snapped his finger, and a goon to his right produces a cigar, puts it in Penguin's mouth, and lights it up. Then Penguin lets out a puff of smoke, and he says, "All right, Batman, you want to be funny? Let's see how you laugh when I have all my men kick your ass." The gate ahead of Batman opens up, and several men come running out to engage Batman. There was a short but violent fight, and Batman emerged triumphant. And the Penguin says, "Oh boy, Batman, you're quite the fighter, but let's see how you can handle this big boy I've been saving up." Then the Penguin uses an umbrella gun and shoots the chain of a giant cage that was suspended over the makeshift arena. The cage falls with a loud thud, and something punches through the metal. Batman recognized it. It was a giant Titan monster, and it began to attack Batman. But Batman, once again, was able to outsmart the Titan fiend by letting it charge at him, and Batman quickly jumped out the way as the Titan fiend quickly charged right into the electrified fencing in the makeshift arena and was electrocuted to death. But in the same process, it shorted out the electric fencing and also destroyed it completely, opening a path for Batman to run up. After the fight was over, Batman gets on his communicator and says,
Batcave, come in. It seems like Penguin got Titan off Arkham Island somehow.
Alfred said, "Oh, that's not good, sir." And then Oracle finally chimes in. "What? How did he get that off the island? What's going on here? And why is your bio reading spiking?" And then Batman says,
Good of you to join us, Oracle. Batcave, please fill her in on what's going on.
So Batman made his way through the Cyrus Pinckney Museum. He had come to a room. There was a big sign on the door labeled Torture Chamber. Batman wondered what that could mean. He opens the door and he slowly goes inside. And in front of him was a massive area. There was no floor. It looked like a super massive aquarium. It was nothing but water. And Batman could see that part of this giant aquarium was frozen. And ahead, in the very far side of the aquarium room, Batman could see the Penguin. He was standing right by the entrance that had a big neon sign indicating the entryway to the Iceberg Lounge. And there was a cop who also had graffitied on his shirt, "Dead Pig." He was running, and the Penguin shoots him with Mr. Freeze's ice gun. The Penguin laughs. And then he says to Batman, "I love Freeze's ice gun. You won't believe the fight the old snowman put up for this thing." And then he says to Batman, "Well, Batman, I hope you enjoyed the copsicle. And when you're done, come to the Iceberg Lounge so I can kick your ass." Batman then glided down onto the ice. And as he landed on the ice, he saw that the ice began to crack. The ice was dangerously thin. Batman made his way cautiously over to the cop until he busted the cop from his ice prison and grappled away with him. Then Batman goes to rescue the other frozen police officers in that room. As he made his way across the thin ice, suddenly a giant great white shark splashes out of the water trying to get him. It almost completely broke the ice, but Batman quickly stepped back and the shark went back in the water. Then Penguin is heard overhead. "Ha ha! I want you to meet Tiny Batman. He's like a garbage disposal. Anything I throw in there, he gets rid of." Well, Batman eventually rescued the other two policemen and got them to safety. Now he had to find Mr. Freeze. And he went into one area that was labeled the War Room. It was just like every other room in the museum, but it had maps to the steel mill and all the movement of Joker's men. Well, Batman sees in a display case, under hot lights, Mr. Freeze. The poor scientist was in agony. He only had one small tube of Cryon X to keep him alive. And Batman says to Mr. Freeze,
Hang on, I'll get you out of there.
Batman finds an entrance to the back way into the display cases. It was crudely boarded up. As Batman was ready to punch through it, all of a sudden, a big hand bursts through the wood and grabs Batman by the throat, and it lifts him off the ground as it was trying to choke him. The rest of the person bursted through the wooden planks, It was none other than the second Abramonchi twin, Sickle, the one who Batman saw earlier. And Sickle says to Batman, "Penguin, give me order not to let you get to Snowman. Kill at all costs," said Penguin. Then Sickle throws Batman, and Batman quickly regained his composure after he hits the ground. And then the fight began, as Batman was avoiding Sickle's deadly giant sickle. But finally, there was a small break, and Batman seized on it and began pounding Sickle until he knocked him out cold. Then Batman runs and frees Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze was in a very bad state. He was weak, and he was on the verge of death. And then Mr. Freeze says, struggling to speak, "The Penguin has my suit. My suit is in a display case all the way out in the..." And Batman interrupts Mr. Freeze and says,
Don't talk. Save your strength. I need your help, and if I get your suit back, do you promise to help me?
and Mr. Freeze says, yes, I'll help you. And Batman says,
Good.
and then he asks Mr. Freeze,
The first thing I need, Penguin is armed with your ice gun. How can I stop him?
and Mr. Freeze answers Batman back, struggling, I keep in my suit a special override device that overrides any of my weapons if they fall into the wrong hands. That's the only way you're gonna stop that idiot. And then Batman says to Mr. Freeze,
I can find your suit if you give me the frequency to the tracking system in your suit.
Mr. Freeze nods his head and then says the number 2, 7, 2, 1, 6, 9, 0, 0. Batman pulls out his palm top and enters the numbers that Mr. Freeze gave him, and soon he picked up the tracking device on Mr. Freeze's suit. Then the palm top began to display the map and the location of Mr. Freeze's suit. And then Batman helps Mr. Freeze to his feet and helps him out to the entryway where the massive shark aquarium is at, and he says to Freeze,
It's not sub-zero temperature, but it's still 17 degrees in here.
Batman noticed that all the thin ice melted in the shark tank, but he also noticed rafts floating around. Batman used his grapple gun and pulled one of the nearby rafts towards him, and he jumps to it. There, he noticed on the raft that there was a small trolling motor, and Batman starts it up and quickly goes over to the other side of the tank where the tracking signal was guiding him to. There was an entryway to some part of the museum. Batman grapples upwards and walks in to the entryway. There he comes upon a giant double door, and there on the double door was labeled Armory. Batman opens up the door quietly and uses detective mode. He detected 6 armed men inside and several hostages. There were the other group of policemen. Batman also noticed a giant woolly mammoth on display there and a giant pterodactyl hanging from the ceiling. But also, Batman looked at the display cases. They contained every military-grade weapon you could imagine. So Batman grapples upwards to the giant pterodactyl and begins to quietly take down all the armed men. Well, one of the men finally noticed that he was the only one in the room and quickly went to the policemen who were all kneeling down with their back to their heads on a bridge that connected the upper levels of the giant room. And Batman knew he had to be very careful to take this man down. One false move and this guy can kill one of the policemen. Batman looked at the man, studied, and quickly made his move and took down the final armed penguin goon. The policemen get up and breathe a sign of relief, and one of them says to Batman,
I saw you clear the room. It's awesome work, man. The name's Tom Miller.
and Batman says to him,
You're part of Gordon's strike team. I've seen your file.
And Miller says to Batman,
You have? I mean, yes, sir. Cobblepot's turned this place into a fortress. Someone ratted us out. Me and the boys got grabbed, brought here, and beaten the crap out of.
and then Batman says to Miller,
You're safe now. There's just 2 more of you unaccounted for.
and then Miller answers Batman.
Have you tried the Iceberg Lounge? Cobblepot'd like to take us in there to beat us up some more. If we're lucky, that's where they are.
Batman acknowledges and walks over to the display case that contained Mr. Freeze's suit, and Miller says,
So that's the famous Freeze suit.
and Batman says,
Unfortunately.
Then Batman proceeds to break the glass of the display case that contained the suit, and Miller says,
Oh, what are you doing?
Batman then reaches in and pulls from a suit a tiny canister of Cryon X, and he also reaches in for the suit and pulls out Freeze's jammer to jam the freeze gun, and he gives it to Miller and says to Miller,
On the other side of the shark tank is Mr. Freeze. Take this to him and give it to him, and then take him back here and help him into the suit. Use one of the many rafts floating in that tank to get Mr. Freeze here, and be very careful with that shark.
and Miller says,
No problem, Batman.
So Batman exited the armory and made it back to the shark tank. He jumps on the raft that he used to get to that end of the tank, and then he used his grapple gun and pulled another nearby raft towards where he was at. And then Batman made his way to the Iceberg Lounge entrance. As he was getting close to the entrance, suddenly the shark splashed out the water and bit down on the raft. Batman laid in a heavy punch, and the shark let go and retreated back into the water. The raft was damaged, but it was still seaworthy, and Batman finally made it to the Iceberg Lounge. In the Iceberg Lounge, Batman can see Penguin was on the main balcony, and he was trying to shoot Batman with the freeze gun. Batman ran and hid in one of the booth seating that was hidden well away from Penguin's view. Batman was starting to feel his body was in pain, and he began to wipe the blood that was coming out of his nose. He said in his mind, "Oh no." Finally, Batman saw the stairwell that led to the second level of the lounge. He had to gun it quickly, and he did. Of course, Penguin tried to shoot him with the ice gun, but he missed. Penguin screamed at him to stay still. Now Batman was on the second level, but Penguin was still shooting at him. Then Penguin stopped momentarily, and Batman stuck his head out from the corner. He noticed where the Penguin was standing, the remaining 2 police officers were there tied up. And then Batman began to run towards where the Penguin was, and the Penguin was trying to shoot him again with the ice gun, but he was missing. Finally, Batman made his way to where the Penguin was. He pulls out the jamming device from his utility belt. He had to get dangerously close to the Penguin, and the Penguin said to Batman, "All right, Batman, if it's a fair fight you want, I'll stop shooting. Come on, take me on." Then Batman darts for the Penguin, and the Batman knew the Penguin was not going to fight fair. He tried to shoot Batman with the ice gun, but Batman was close enough and quickly pressed the lone button on the jamming device, and it worked. The Penguin was like, "What the hell?" But then, before the Penguin could do anything, Batman quickly shoulder rammed the Penguin, and the Penguin went flying off the balcony, and he landed on the dance floor below with a loud thud. Then the Penguin lets out a loud moan. Oh. And then Batman frees the remaining policemen, and they looked over the balcony to see the Penguin lying flat on the dance floor. And one of the cops said, "Wow, Batman, I think he just broke his back." And Batman says,
Come with me. I'll take the 2 of you to safety. The others have been saved, save one, but I couldn't do nothing to save him.
Well, Batman, the 2 remaining police officers, make it back to the front entrance of the museum, and Batman was dragging the injured Penguin. There at the entrance by the ninja lady display case was Mr. Freeze in his suit, and he says aloud, "Where is Cobblepot?" The ninja lady was also standing up now too, Batman had noticed as he came into the room. Then he proceeds to throw the Penguin right at the foot of Mr. Freeze, and the Penguin proceeds to say, "Well, looky here." But then Mr. Freeze proceeds to step on Penguin's left hands as you could hear the bones crunching, and Penguin lets out a loud scream. And then Batman hollers,
Enough!
but Mr. Freeze was not letting up. Batman shouts at him again, "Enough," but then finally Freeze says, "Of course!" And then he takes his foot off Penguin's hand, and then he grabs Penguin by his shirt collar and then slams him against the display case of the ninja woman, cracking the glass. And Freeze says to Penguin, "You will pay for what you did to me, Cobblepot." Then he violently throws the Penguin into the display case that was made for Bruce Wayne and locks him up in there. Afterwards, Batman walks up to Mr. Freeze and says,
The cure, Freeze.
and Mr. Freeze says to Batman, "There isn't one." And Batman says,
What?
then Mr. Freeze says, "Perhaps I should elaborate. Creating an antidote for the disease that afflicts the clown was easy, but unfortunately, it degrades quickly." And Mr. Freeze goes on to further explain to Batman, "It needs a restorative element, some kind of reforming enzyme. Without it, the cure degrades before it could help the host." And Batman says,
I've seen this before.
and Mr. Freeze goes on to explain further to Batman, finding the enzyme is not the only problem. It has to be adapted, bonded to human DNA. Research that will take decades. Time that it appears you don't have, Batman. And Batman says to Mr. Freeze,
What have I told you that I know of a man who's been exposed to that enzyme? He's been using it for centuries to extend his life.
and Mr. Freeze says, "What man?" And Batman says,
His name is Ra's al Ghul. He's the founder and leader of the Society of Shadows, an international criminal organization and eco-terrorist group. The problem is he's been dead for a while.
and Mr. Freeze then says, "Well, I guess you and the clown are doomed." And Batman says to Mr. Freeze,
No, not really. I think I have a lead now.
Batman was implying of the ninja lady who was a member of Talia's elite guard that was in a display case, who was now roused by Batman talking about Ra's al Ghul. She quickly bursts forth from the display case and says to Batman,
Blasphemer! You're not worthy to speak of the great Ra's al Ghul!
she runs off, knocking down several of the police officers that were there standing guard at the entryway. And Batman runs right behind her. He quickly sees that the officers that she knocked out were okay. One of the officers says, "Yeah, they'll be okay. But man, who is she?" And Batman said to the officer,
I can't explain now, but they're lucky they're still alive.
Batman knew in his mind it would be futile to run after her. She was faster, but he did see a trail of blood that she was leaving behind from a probable injury when she broke through the glass. Batman used his detective mode, scanned the blood sample, and was now able to get a trail. He exits the museum and runs out. He could hear there was a lot of rowdiness going on outside in the super prison. Word had quickly got out that the Penguin has been beaten. And now all the Two-Face's gangs were there trying to take the Penguin territory in the prison. And Batman could hear some violent fights going on and can hear some distant gunshots going off. Batman just kept on running, following the blood trail with his detective mode. The trail took him to the rooftop level where it was safer. And also overhead, there was a bad lightning storm forming and heavy snowfall. Batman ran and ran, pushing himself through the pain, through the misery, as it was starting to get very difficult to run, to keep up. He was starting to get short of breath. He could feel himself getting worse. Well, Batman reached the dead end. The blood trail was beginning to run cold. Just as he was about to give up, suddenly the ninja woman attacked him, and she was not alone now. There were several of them, and they began to fight Batman. Batman mustered the strength and began to fend them off as he was barely taking them down. Finally, the one that he was chasing began to take him on a one-on-one fight. Batman was able to stealthily put the tracer on her back before she pinned Batman down on the roof with the sword at his throat, and she says to him,
You only continue to live because the great Ra's al Ghul allows it.
As she was saying that, 4 more ninjas jump in, and it seemed hopeless for Batman when all of a sudden, a loud whistle got their attention. And suddenly, bird-shaped batarangs hit them. It was Nightwing, and Nightwing moves in and takes down the other ninjas that had come in, and the one ninja that Batman was chasing finally just ran off. Batman gets up, brushes himself, and says to Nightwing,
I had it under control.
And Nightwing says,
It did not look like it from where I was standing at.
And Batman says to Nightwing,
Go back to Bloodhaven. The city needs you.
And Nightwing says back angrily to Batman,
What? Not even a thank you? After saving you? Jeez, Batman, you never change.
Then Batman apologizes to Nightwing, and then he asks Nightwing,
Who sent you here tonight?
And Nightwing responded,
It was Alfred. He is worried sick about you.
And then Batman reaches in for his utility belt and pulls out a small vial of blood and tosses it to Nightwing. Nightwing catches it, and Batman says to Nightwing,
Take this. Get this analyzed. Anyone with this blood in them will be dead in 24 hours.
Nightwing began to ask Batman where he got the blood from before he realized who the blood came from. And then he says to Batman,
Alfred wanted me to give you this. He thought you could use it.
And Nightwing pulls out from his utility belt the zipline launcher and tosses it to Batman. And then Batman says to him,
Hurry, have every hospital searched for this blood.
And Nightwing just silently runs off and leaps from the roof. Then Batman contacts Oracle and says,
Oracle, change of plans. I'm going after the Society of Shadows.
And Oracle says, Why? What do they got to do with this? Then Oracle says, Oh wait, does this have to do with Ra's or his daughter? And Batman responds back,
Penguin had one of the Society's soldiers imprisoned in the museum. I recognized the insignia. She was part of Talia's elite guard.
And then Oracle responds back angrily, I knew it. What is it with that woman that instantly makes her the most important person in your world? Then Batman responds,
Talia is not the goal here. I just uploaded the unfinished cure from Freeze onto your computer.
And then Oracle says, Oh, I see. You need Ra's al Ghul's blood to finish the cure. Then I apologize, she says. And then she continues to tell Batman, just let Ra's al Ghul be the focus, not her. Don't let that woman get in the way. I have a bad feeling she's going to be the cause of your downfall one day, said Oracle. After their conversation, Batman pulls out of his utility belt his palm-top computer and begins to track down the female ninja. Like and subscribe. The end.